glamping businesses that I've seen, NC500 Pods being one of them, obviously. The one thing I always really like about them is that they seem to have a really good connection with the local community, local businesses. When you arrive at some of these places, you've got like a welcome hamper, but there's those really nice local products. It just feels like you've got more of a connection with the area that you're in. If there was two glamping sites in a hypothetical situation next door to each other, and they offered similar product, I'd be looking at, well, like, do they connect with the locals? Do they offer me some local advice? Do I get a discount with a bike hire company along the road or something like that? Because that's got a little edge to it, which is quite nice. It goes back to that thing about you're saying about the locals not liking the glamping sites. It's just because one person doesn't like it, the other 99 people might like it.
Hello and welcome to the Glamping Tech podcast. Today I'm joined by Craig Mills, who's the head of operations at NC500. NC500, not to be confused with NC500 Pods, which is our co-founder's glamping business, is the brand behind the North Coast 500 route, a 500-mile stretch of road across the north of Scotland. The company was established only a few years ago, but it's taken off completely since then. The reason I wanted to talk to Craig is because there are a lot of parallels between his business and the glamping business. For one, he has to strike a balance between preserving the feel of the local area while building a successful business. He also has to deal with wary locals, which is something that you'll probably have to do on your glamping journey. Craig gave some really useful advice for dealing with these issues, as well as on creating a good team and partnering with local businesses. I'm really happy with this one, and I'd strongly recommend listening to the end. As ever, I hope you enjoy and find value in today's episode. Hi Craig, thank you for coming on the Glamping Tech podcast. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Nick. No, thank you very much for having me today. It's great to put a face to a name. It's great to see you.
Perfect. So you're the head of operations at the NC500, which is the brand behind the big North Coast 500 route all across the north coast of Scotland. It's got loads of scenery, loads of tourist attractions and all that good stuff. I'm just interested in, well, first of all, tell us about yourself and how you came to work for NC500 and the business and the concept behind it.
Yeah, of course. It's quite different for me. Usually for the last 5 years or just over 4 years I've been with the company, every chat that I've done has always been about the route. So this is one of the very first times that we've ever spoke about the team behind it and things. So it's really exciting to talk about. So myself, Craig, I've been with North Coast beg your pardon, sorry. Been with North Coast 500 for just over 4 years. And before that, I had quite a long career in retail, working for a national retailer, always working all over Britain, all over Scotland, always working my way north, trying to get as far north as possible because I love the area. And so I've moved all the way up here, opened a shop in Inverness for my last company. And just my situation changed, family, kids came along, everything like that. Decided I didn't want to work in retail any longer. And I seen an advert for North Coast 500, and just from holidaying in that area for so many years, it just interested me. I didn't really understand what it was about. I went along to the interview, quite open-minded about it, not knowing that Tom, my boss, he was looking for somebody with a huge amount of retail background to take on the role. So it was just quite a good match made in heaven, really. So for the last 4 years, been working non-stop with North Coast 500, getting a lot of things changed, growing with the company. The company is only 6 years old. So it's been quite an interesting journey, trying to change a lot of things for hopefully for the better for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, and for the benefit of the listeners, what is the business model like? Obviously, you said, off camera, we said, so we always have to mention the dirty word that's money. So what sort of model do you have and how do you guys make your money?
Yeah, so it goes right back to the inception of the route, which was probably in your first question. So I blabbered on as I tend to. The North Coast 500, the idea all came about because it was seen as a way to try and get people north of Inverness. For so many years, Inverness has been seen as the ceiling of Scotland. People get there and that's their trip done. They explore the area. And don't get me wrong, it's a lovely area. It's fantastic, Inverness. But the North Island Initiative were tasked with this concept of how do you get people further north, because there's a whole landscape here that's just untouched. It's the size of Belgium in the North Coast 500, so it's a big area, lots of things to do. But unfortunately, it's an area that's in a bit of decline with an aging population. There's not a lot of opportunities, but tourism it's got to be one of those opportunities. So Northland Initiative were tasked with that concept, and they quickly came up with a few ideas, which was rather than selecting one other area and creating effectively another Inverness, you could take Ullapool, Wick, Gairloch, Tain, wherever it may be, and you'd create another Inverness. It should be a honeypot. So they decided that they wanted to try and get people to move around the area and see more of it and see the differences in the area. And that didn't have to be all in one go, a week, 2 week long trip. It could be over months, over years. Come to one area and next year come to another area and see the different areas that make up the route. So that was why the idea behind the North Coast 500 was to get people to see the area and come up north. It was decided that rather than being the traditional route to market in Scottish tourism, which is centrally funded and getting government money issued to you, that this was going to effectively wash its own face, where we're going to stand on our own 2 feet, we're going to be a private company, and where we're going to do things differently. And that hasn't appeased a lot of people. A lot of people dislike that because they're quite traditional in their ways. But at the same time, it's a lot of people took notice. And that's been part of the story of why it's become so popular. It has worked to a degree, being a private company. So we were told with our proof of the concept by Professor John Lennon that if we found the way to monetize this brand, that's the key to unlocking it. That's how we were going to be successful. So that was quite interesting. He thought this was a great idea. That gave us the backing. We just had to find a way to monetize it. So the way that it was started to monetize was the trademarks North Coast 500 and NC500 were registered. So we took them out. So we've got them and we started to say, well, how can we start to promote the businesses and to make money off these trademarks? So in its most basic form, we have got a business membership scheme, which allows the local businesses, such as Glamping, NC500 Pods, to use our branding for the promotion of their business. So we allow you guys to use NC500, North Coast 500, whenever you're doing all your promotions. You pay for that right to do that. But what the trademarks have also done as a subsequent is we can stop people from promoting the area that are maybe doing it a disservice. So, people who have been organising races around the North Coast 500, we can stop that because we have the trademarks. People who are advertising motorhomes that are way too big for the route, trying to go over the Bailiff and the Bar and whatnot, we can stop them. So that's been a byproduct of having the trademarks. It's not all about that dirty money word. It's also helped try and police the route to an extent. So that's one of our ways of having an income generation is with the businesses. We've also got a different level of membership for people that are outside the route, because if you go onto our website, you'll see Arnold Clark and Diageo and all these big companies that are quite clearly not local businesses. So we offer a different level of membership to those guys, depending on what they want. And I think we'll maybe touch on some partnerships later on, but that's why we work with those guys. The trademarks allow us also to put up license agreements with businesses that perhaps don't want to become a business member, but they want to use our trademarks. So we'll work with people to do that. We've got exciting new products coming out this year that are using our trademarks, which are really, really good. I can't say too much just now, unfortunately, but watch this space for some really cool products hitting the shelf, which is really quite good. And also we have got our own merchandise and our own memberships as well, our private memberships. Now, this is just something that we do. It was never something I intended for us to have as this big income driver, as t-shirts and private memberships, but the demand is there. So we have got that there. Watch this space again, because this week we're launching a whole new rebranding, new merchandise, everything's hitting the shelves this week. So it's really exciting, and it's good that with the trademarks and with the merchandise, it's a way of us having to stay fresh. We've done a lot of rebranding work over the past few months. It's come to its fruition this week. And the benefit of that is that, we will help monetize our brand, but at the same time, it's also going to help those 500 local businesses that we work with, because it's keeping things fresh for them, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and this obviously sounds like a huge project, really. You mentioned North of Inverness, it's size of Belgium, which surprised me. But you've got quite a small team, am I right in thinking? And how does that work, and how do you guys tick?
Yeah, so the team is, when I tell this people this, they're always quite surprised, because we have got a team of, it's 6 staff in total. 3 of us are full-time, that's including myself, and 3 are part-time. So we're really small, and they think that last year we had just over 1 million people alone last year visit our website. We've got an audience reach of 11 billion people, and social media reach of 23 million. That's 6 people have done that in the last year. It's unbelievable. It's quite a good success story to tell people. When I speak to other small businesses around about the route, and oh, Craig, can you do me a discounted rate, please? I've only got 5 staff. I'm going, yeah, that's just less than me. We're a small team as well, so it's quite nice when you hear that. A lot of people think that we were some huge company, huge organization, and it couldn't be further from the truth. That's the thing. But it just shows how hardworking we all are. And the one thing that all 6 of us share, because we've all got our own areas of responsibility. Mine is quite overarching with a lot of things. Jack of all trades, master of none, I think the saying is for me. I do a lot of it. But one thing that keeps us all kind of tied together is that genuinely each individual works for us is the passion that we've got for the area, and it shines in all of our work. That's the thing, we all care so much about this area. So the thing that drew me to the job was the fact that I knew the area so well. I'd holidayed here. I thought it'd be really good to be part of the messaging, to get more people up here and let them see what I see and why I come on holiday here. And when I've been recruiting new staff, or when other staff have left, it's the one thing that's always been there, has been the passion. And in my time, the people that have left us, they've left quite, they didn't want to. It was just circumstances mostly, because they'd wanted to be here still. They just loved the job, loved the area. It's really good. And being a small team, as you guys are similar as well, you'll know that another big thing for us is that all of us working together, we all can work hard with each other and pick up parts of each other's jobs. Others, when someone's struggling with something, we can help step in. So hard work, dedication, and passion is really what keeps us going, which is really, really good for the last 4 years.
And how do you think that passion has transferred into success? Why is the NC500 so popular with visitors?
Yeah, so I think that back to the start, and my boss will probably hit me for saying this, but I think genuinely at the very start, it was a case of it was the right product at the right time. I think there was an element of luck there. Don't get me wrong.
That's the case with a lot of businesses, isn't it?
It really is. And I think the staycation market, as the media have started to kind of dress up as that, which I personally hate that terminology, staycation, but it's the buzzword, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that was starting to take off. As you could see with Visit Scotland, with their year of coastal waters and everything, it just all tied together nicely. The Instagram kind of influencer generation was starting to really kick off, and I think people were realizing that you didn't have to pay hundreds of pounds on flights and accommodation to go abroad. It didn't have to happen like that. You could stay here, you could travel here, you could do things a bit differently. And effectively, the fact that the North Coast 500, I've said it a few times now, the broken record being the size of Belgium, is so diverse and it appeals to so many different people. And that's what's really kept the popularity, the high level that it's at. I think at the start, we hit a real kind of oil patch where it was great. We managed to get that interest peaked, but we managed to keep it up there because there's so many things for people to do. I always get asked, what's your most favorite part of the route, or where would you go? And I genuinely have to say to people, well, it depends. Because if like yesterday, I had a day off and it was just me on my own because my car was in the garage getting fixed. That's why I had a day off. And I'd go out on my bike for 3 hours on the West Coast. I've talked to people who are really professional cyclists in their own right. If they can cycle anywhere in the world, they'll come to the Northwest Coast because it's the best place to go. If I've got a couple of mates up, again, we'll go to somewhere like Torridon, go mountain biking. If I'm out with my family and my young kids, we'll go to the East Coast because the beaches, I think, are just a bit more accessible with a young family and there's a bit more stuff for them to do. So I couldn't pinpoint one area where I think is the best. So that's why I think it's so popular, because there is so much different appeal for different people. And I would be doing us NC500 Limited a disservice if I didn't say that the way that we're set up has helped that popularity stay up there as well, because we're constantly looking for new opportunities. We're not sitting still. We've got some big talks with some potential new partners this week. We've just launched a couple of new partnerships in the past few weeks, and it's something that we're always trying to do to get us to the next level. We have to keep on finding new products to keep us going, and that's because of the way we're set up. If we don't have that income coming in, then we don't have the job. I get replaced, so I have to keep on thinking of things and doing things and getting things out there, and it has to be the right fit for the area, though. That's the thing. We can't just go and sign up. I'm trying to think of somebody who wouldn't say something like Lamborghini, race cars. That's not right for the rich because it's money. But we find the right partners, we work with them, and yeah, I think we've still got a lot to go. There's some, I can't say too much just now, again, because we've got some exciting things coming out in the future. As people think that it's just a driving route, and absolutely not. Absolutely not. Watch this space for some cool new products this year.
And one of those right kind of partners, I imagine, are glamping sites. And obviously that's our interest here at Glampitect. I know NC500 pods, Callum and Ali's brand are part of the NC500. And I just having a look at your website earlier, and there are other glamping sites on there as well. So does that make up a decent proportion of your partnerships, glamping sites?
Absolutely. Yeah. Personally, I think glamping is fantastic. I think it's popular across the whole of the UK right now. I think it's safe to say. And the fact that it's growing in popularity up here in the Highlands is just fantastic, because the thing I like about it personally is that I'm more akin to putting a rucksack on my back and heading off into the hills with my tent for a few days. So glamping for me is luxury. When I rock up to a glamping site and everything's there, it's so good, but I don't feel like I'm in a hotel. I don't feel like I'm in a guest house. But at the same time, it can bridge the gap the other way for people who maybe want to experience, that wild kind of camping effect, but not really wild. And so it can bridge together these two groups of people who otherwise maybe wouldn't have met. And I've met so many people out glamping down in Wales back about 10, 11 years ago who I still keep in touch with, because we just clicked. We'd never met before. We probably never would meet, but this glamping site had brought us together. I think it's so good. The glamping businesses that I've seen, NC500 pods being one of them, obviously. The one thing I always really like about them is that they seem to have a really good connection with the local community and local businesses. When you arrive at some of these places, you've got like a welcome hamper, which has got locally sourced goods, if you tick that option when you're booking, obviously. But there's those really nice local products. It just feels like you've got more of a connection with the area that you're in. No disrespect to any other hotel or accommodation provider, because they do that as well. It just feels different, I think, when you go to a glamping site. So hopefully there'll be more of them popping up around about the route as over the coming years as well, because I think this year is going to be huge for glamping, as people are still socially distancing. People are still a bit reluctant about getting into lifts and hotels and whatnot with other people. I think glamping is going to be really, really popular this year, more than ever. So fingers crossed it will keep growing over the next few years, and we can all work together to get that.
Yeah, let's hope so. And you mentioned at the start about a big part of your business was convincing people to go north of Inverness, and how it was built on driving footfall to places where there probably wasn't that footfall beforehand. And a big part of glamping really is a lot of it's in remote places in the countryside and things like that. You don't really plonk a glamping site in the middle of Glasgow. So what sort of tactics did you employ to drive footfall to these remote places? Because I imagine there's a lot of correlation between how you do that and how glamping sites in remote places would do that. So what sort of tactics did you use, and how could they be applied to glamping sites?
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on. I would not recommend a glamping site in the middle of Glasgow, having lived there for a number of years. It wouldn't be done very well. I think the big thing is, and I'm the wrong person in the business to give the intricate details on it, but is content creation and interaction with your business, with your visitors, even before they arrive. On social media, on your website, on emails. And when I say content, when I mention this to some small businesses, which again, we are a small business, they get really scared. They think that I mean some highly polished media content, images, spending thousands of pounds. Not at all. These days, a lot of the interaction that we get on social media and on our website is user created by with an iPhone or with any kind of phone. They take a really good picture, and the people just go crazy for it online, and that's what it's really helped drive the footfall. And I think when you're living in an area, like looking at my window just now, I see these amazing views. It's a nice glen that I live in, just at the very start of the North Coast 500. It's in Inverness. It's a nice glen, lovely trees. I take that for granted when I'm standing at the sink doing the dishes, but actually, to that visitor coming from further afield, Cornwall, Truro, far-flung visitors, that's really what they want to come to the area for. So it's just trying to show what you've got on your doorstep, and just it doesn't have to be dressed up. I think the more raw the content is, the better. I think just showing people in its barest, because I think some organizations will wait till they get the perfect day to get a drone operator out or get a photographer out on that one day of summer that we get, and they'll take a picture, and then the visitor comes, it's raining. Yeah, well, it rains quite a lot here, sorry. So the raw pictures are always really, really good. And I think that, if I was comparing two, if glamping sites, if there was two glamping sites in a hypothetical situation next door to each other, and they offered similar products, the first thing we all look at as consumers is price and availability and ease of booking. That's what we all look for. But if it came down to those were all similar, I'd be looking at, well, do they connect with the locals? Do they offer me some local advice? If I book with NC500 pods, do I get a discount with a bike hire company along the road or something like that? Because that's got a little edge to it, which is quite nice. There was a company in Lochaber, a previous job, who did that. When you arrived at their glamping site, there would be bikes there for you. If you wanted it, they could arrange that. So it was really nice. When you've driven for 4 hours to get to your location, you could hop on a bike and go and explore the area. It was just really nice to see that. And I think that's what would spin it for me a little bit. And I would pay more for that to do it. I mean, I always say to people, whether it's glamping or hotels, whatever the business is, think, would you buy it or would you go there? Now, always put yourself in the consumer's shoes. With accommodation as a whole, it falls into that need category. And my retail background, we always had the two columns of need and want. And you don't want a room, but you need somewhere to stay when you're on holiday. So it's just then about how you try and sell yourself over those other needs. And I think it's just always putting yourself into that customer's shoes.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue really into the next question, because as I said, your business is built on driving people to these more remote places, but it's also built on partnerships with other businesses. And you said there about partnerships with local bike places. And one thing that we try and push at Glamping, because eventually more and more glamping sites are coming to the market, so they need to be able to differentiate themselves from the local competition. And one of the things that we suggest is they need to have USPs. And one way of having a USP is partnering with a local business, like, as you say, a bike company or a yoga retreat or a whiskey distillery or something like that. And now you guys are obviously the experts in doing that, because that's your whole business model. So what advice would you give to glamping site owners in partnering with local businesses and how they should go about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the glowing experts in that. That's great. I'm going to record that one, definitely. Definitely, the partnerships, the lessons that I've learned have been, always make sure from the word to go with any partnership that there's a few key things, and that is that, is it beneficial to both partners? It's a waste of time if it's too heavily weighted to one side. Inevitably, it's not going to work out. So you have to set out right from the word go with each partner involved is the commitments needed from each person and the basics of what will you do and what will I do in this partnership. Can that be achieved? Anything above and beyond that is great, but it's got to be agreed right from the word go. We have had partnerships where it hasn't worked out, and I would never disagree with that. We have had that, but when we look back and we assess them, it's because those expectations have been a bit different from each side, and that's where it's fallen apart. And that's the learning curve for us. And it's basic, but it's learning is that when that partnership has ended, in my time with the company, we have never ended it on a bad footing. We've always ended a partnership on a good relationship, and we've reviewed it. We've said to people, this didn't work, did it? Okay, let's move on. We may revisit it in the future because the partnership hasn't worked out on one specific date. It might work in future. So never close a door completely on a partnership. And the key word is partner. That's the thing. It's a two-way street. That's the big thing. You've got to make sure that each person is willing to put in the time and the effort involved. They've got to make sure they do it. I say to everybody, whether they are a one-person small business based in the far-flung, very, very, very far north of the route, or Diageo, or Dun at Bay or Arnold Clark, whoever it is I'm talking to, I always say to them, you get out of this what you put in. And when you look at the really successful partnerships that we've had, that's been really clear that each team has put in all the maximum effort to it, and they've got the best. You know, you look at, I mentioned Arnold Clark. You know, Arnold Clark told us that their Inverness branch was the second busiest branch in the whole of the UK after becoming partners with us. So that's great. You know, that's brilliant. You know, in the same respect, you know, a smaller company, but the Gairloch Hotel in Gairloch, surprisingly, they've always fully booked. You know, compared to other hotels in the area who are not members of ours. So they put a lot of effort into it, and they hopefully see the benefits of it as well. So it's just always make sure that you set out what each person's got to put into it, right from the word go, and don't be afraid to pick up the phone to each other. That's the big thing. Have that chat if you need to.
Absolutely. And another thing in common that you have with glamping site owners is you'll probably face public criticism at some point. I'm sure you've had people express concerns about, you know, traffic on the route and things like that. And obviously, you know, the belief is that the benefits outweigh the drawbacks. Clearly it does in your case. And a big part of glamping site setup is during the planning process, you'll get people posing objections about traffic in the area, about road access and things like that. And some is valid. You know, people genuinely looking out for the local area, and they have a difference of opinion with the site owners. Some, you get the sense that they're just protesting for the sake of protesting, but that's another issue. But how do you deal with that sort of public criticism and perhaps spin it into a positive, and sort of emphasize that the benefits do outweigh the disadvantages?
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. We don't get anything at all at NC500. No, I think the big thing for us is that all the criticisms put our way, we do listen to, is that we don't bury our heads in the sand. You know, I always go back to that passion that me and my team have for the area. You know, we don't want to see people misbehaving in the business area. We don't want to see the roads, traffic jammed up. None of us want to see that. But it's how it's handled and how it's dealt with is the key thing. We would rather have a really productive chat with somebody about their fears, and we can help, you know, address those fears with them, rather than, you know, you pick it up in a newspaper or on social media, which is just a horrendous place to be sometimes. You know, people go on there because effectively with that, all it does is it damages the area, and it damages your business. It doesn't just damage one business, because visitors will be put off coming to the area, and that's not what any of us want. We want to see businesses flourish. We want to see communities grow. We want to see that happen. And I say a lot of the chats I've had with people who've had fears have actually been very, very productive. And I can point to a few things. Our website is the biggest tool that we have at our disposal. We have changed things on our website on the back of conversations with people who felt we weren't displaying information clearly. Well, okay, let's change that then. This my team hate me saying it, but nothing is set in stone. You know, it's not like we've done it, so we can't change it. So we have changed a lot of things on the back of good conversations. I always listen to people's complaints. You know, if they want to get in touch, they can always get in touch with me. And the way I enter all those conversations is I don't go into it defensive, offensive, anything at all. I just go into it really trying my hardest to see it from their side. That's the big thing. It's just trying to understand where they're coming from and not go on the attack. If we need to do that, we can do that, but I would rather not do that. And the thing that drives us forward an awful lot is evidence. It's not saying that someone's lying at all, that they've had 400 sports cars drive past their house yesterday, but we've got to look at the evidence, because people's perceptions sometimes can overtake that in their minds. And so we do work with Police Scotland, the Scottish Ambulance Service, Highland Council, Highlands, all the authorities we can work with to gather the information. Traffic is a very interesting one. I've had people say to me the traffic has gone up every year for the past 6 years. We're at the traffic counters that are around the route actually show that that's not the case. It's just people's perceptions that it got busier. You know, traffic as well, it's an interesting one for the route, because You know, the traffic counters don't differentiate between local commercial vehicles who are, you know, out delivering fish to the hotels that are the tourists are eating, you know, that kind of thing. So it's an interesting one, but I think most of the time with people, when we can sit down and have a chat with them, and we can present to them, this is how we're operating, you know, and this is what we're here to do. We all walk away usually happy with each other, that we're all doing our best. You know, as I say, it's nobody wants to see people to make cars. Nobody wants to see these horrible things. So we're trying to work together to get the same common goal. It can be really hard. I'm not going to lie. You can walk out of these meetings. I'm sure people walk away from me with the same headache that I've got, going, my goodness, that was hard. But it does work. So the thing is, for the advice I'd give to any kind of glamping site or anything at all would be that, you know, bring the locals in, interact with the local community, like I've done. You know, I've sat down with large groups of people and communities and shown them all of the stuff that we do. You know, bring them in. You can understand the local fears, especially just after the dreaded C word in the past year, that people are a bit scared of people coming in and out of their communities. If they've lived in a small community all their lives and all of a sudden lots of visitors are coming through, they get a bit scared. So with a local kind of glamping sites, bring them in and show them how you operate. This is the way the vehicles will come in. This is the safety kind of measures we have in place. All the rest of it, it just puts people's minds at ease a little bit, and it can just really play a big part. And if they have got any fears, then, you know, they can talk to you about it. But keeping a good dialogue is always a good thing with any complaints.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a common theme in this podcast. We've interviewed a few glamping site owners, and you know, it's commonly said, you know, a collaborative approach is far better than an adversarial one. And it can be really frustrating sometimes because people can just genuinely be difficult, and you've just got to get through it. And that's why I think sometimes people outsource it to us, and so we put the planning applications for them. But yeah, it is important that you speak to the neighbours and things like that, and try and get them on your side, no matter how difficult and grueling it might be. And you know, you'll get through it one way or another, and they'll turn out to it to like it. I was speaking to Christine McLean, who runs the two NC500 pod sites, and I can't remember if it was Brewer or Melvick site, but they had a neighbour who really was against the project from the start, absolutely hated it. Since it's been up and running, they've absolutely loved it and think it's great. So sometimes you just got to get through it, and it will all be all right in the end, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's just being able to talk to people. Most people, I'll find, when they've got social media, or you know, they're writing an email, whether it's to me or to a journalist, they're very, very, very vocal, and they will put in block capital letters. And 9 times out of 10, when you sit with these people, have a cup of coffee, they're a kitten, you know, and you can actually talk to them. And again, it goes back to that thing about you're saying about you know, the locals not liking the glamping sites. You know, it's just because one person doesn't like it, the other 99 people might like it, but they just won't speak about it. How many people fill out a customer service form to say they were happy with the service they received? Not many, but I'm willing to bet a lot more people fill out the one to say they weren't happy because something wasn't quite right. So it's balance. It's a real hard balancing act. But I think if anybody out there ever has got the golden ticket on how to deal with it, I'd be really happy to hear with them. I think it's just best practice with each other, isn't it?
Yeah. And so obviously with that comes the difficulty of balancing a thriving business with preserving the local feel of the area and the natural feel of it as well. So if you could give one tip to a business owner, preferably a glamping site owner, in how they build a profitable business while it's also protecting the local area and keeping it its purity, I suppose, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, again, I'm sure I could talk for a good few hours about that, because it is so complex, if I'm honest with you. I think going back to getting involved with the local community is a big thing. Making sure that you're talking to everybody, involving people. If there's changes happening, let them know the changes are happening. You know, encourage them to come and see you, because I think that's the key for me, is the community is going to be the big thing for you. You can, again, you understand the fears of the people when they see things kind of changing, and if somebody's moved to an area for that peace and quiet tranquility, you know, they've maybe had a busy life in Glasgow or something, and they've now retired to a quiet area. You know, they shouldn't have that benefit for against the community, you know, because the community wants to thrive, the community wants to prosper. And I think that's key, is just explaining to them, listen, we're not here to do anything bad. This is what we want to achieve. That can be a big thing, but you know, it's not it's not a North Coast 500 specific issue. It's about areas having to try and balance the visitors. You know, you look down to Aviemore, look to the Lochholm and the Trossachs National Park. Further, I mean, extreme example, but look at Everest. You know, Everest has how many thousands of tons of rubbish lifted from it every single year, you know, and you think, well, it's the highest place on earth. There's got to be a very, very good balancing act. And I think the one thing that goes through it all is that community thing, is trying to get across to them. So always make the most of your local community, you know, and specifically for the North Coast 500, you know, be a member of the North Coast 500. That's not a sales pitch from me, but what we try and do with the business members as well is we get them all involved. We try and get them to talk to each other, because you might find that, you know, when you open up your site in Brora, for instance, or wherever it is you may open up your site, that your next door neighbours had the same issue with the same things, and they can give you some advice and help you get through that. It's a community on its own, the North Coast 500 business member community. So that's about a selling point for us, but it does work. You know, a lot of these businesses come together and help each other, which is what we want to achieve as well.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how can they go about doing that?
Yeah, so go onto the website, if you hit the inquiries button or email us button, with us being a tiny little team, it might not come directly to me, but it will get to me within about the next 10 minutes because we send it across to each other. Yeah, please do get in touch with any questions, though. I'm always happy to chat away to people. And so this has been different, talking about the team and the behind the scenes rather than talking about the route. So hopefully people have learned a little bit. We'll put some myths and legends to bed for the North Coast 500.
Well, that was fantastic. Thank you for coming on, Craig.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Glamping Tech podcast. I hope you enjoyed and that you found value in today's episode. If you did, feel free to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, as it really helps us move up the podcast rankings. Thank you.